Hey guys, I'm Lauren and welcome back to my channel. I provide a weekly dose of wedding planning goodness for the modern bride. So if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to my channel and hit the bell for more wedding planning goodness. So this week I thought it was only right to talk about a particular topic that has been on my mind recently. I don't know if you've noticed, but the weather one week is really amazingly hot and then it's raining all week. Let's dive into this week's content, which is all about weather on your wedding day, what to consider, and a few little tips for you. Let's go. So the different weather can mean that you're going to need different contingency plans on your wedding day. And living in the UK means we don't really know what the weather's actually going to do we? Let's be honest. If you're getting married abroad, you probably have a higher chance of knowing, say you're getting married in the Med, you probably know that the weather's going to be hot and lovely. It's obviously not guaranteed, but there is a higher chance of it being better weather for you. Over here, we literally don't have a clue. So let's go through the different weather types and how they can affect your wedding day and what you can do to just make sure you've got all the bases covered. So let's first of all start off with wet weather, because I think that is where everybody panics. And a little tip for you, or a little side note, did you know it's lucky to have a bit of rain on your wedding day? Yep, true story. Okay, so if you're getting married in the UK, you definitely have to have a wet weather plan. If there's any part of your day that's outside, you must have this contingency in place, because there is no guarantee that it will be dry. If you don't, it will likely rain because you didn't have a plan. That's my theory. If you have a plan, you'll be fine. You won't need it. So let's think about how you can cover all bases. Are you thinking about having an outside ceremony? I love an outside ceremony. But yes, England. So make sure that you've got a plan in place. Is there another option to hold your ceremony if the weather isn't playing ball? Is there somewhere inside? Or are you able to hire a marquee or a stretch tent to cover the ceremony area so that you can still get married in the outside location but keep both yourselves and your guests dry? If you're hiring a marquee and you're maybe going to use it and maybe not, you will most likely be charged the full fee because you'll be letting the company know last minute. But in my mind, that's a good option still because you might need it. Simple. So what about the drinks reception? A lot of time guests will go outside for the drinks reception. Now, do make sure that your venue has an option for guests to go if the weather isn't being kind. So say you're having your ceremony inside and then your guests are going to be going outside for the drinks reception whilst they perhaps turn the space around for the wedding breakfast. If it's raining, where are your guests going to go? Is there another space inside the venue? Do they need to stay in the space? Because they can't if they're doing a turnaround. Do you need to put a marquee up outside? Whatever it might be, you need to consider the options and know what's going to happen if it's wet. And finally, when it comes to wet weather, I think couples just worry about their photos as well. They want to be able to have lovely photos and they think, oh, if it's raining, we can't go outside, we can't use the space, we can't have our photos in the gardens. Yes, you can! There are some amazing pictures in wet weather, and honestly, they're some of the photos that really stand out to me. I've had couples that have had a little bit of rain on their day and they've had the most amazing photos. Make something of it. Find a photographer that is comfortable shooting outside and all different types of weather. Look through their portfolio. One of my photographers is amazing at shooting in any weather. She's done photos in stormy weather. She's done photos in very wet, rainy weather, and they're amazing. Windy weather, sunny weather. You can get something amazing. It's just not perhaps what you might have envisaged to start with. Have yourself a brolly. Go out in the rain, have fun. If you're worried about your hair and makeup, perhaps choose a style that's a little bit more boho, and perhaps just make sure that you've got extra hairspray and extra makeup on the day so that you can top up afterwards. But it's all about making memories and having fun, so just remember that. Okay, so what about cold weather? Cold weather is the one out of everything that is the most likely and isn't going to catch you off guard. If you've got cold weather, it is most likely because you've booked your wedding during the autumn-winter months. So you're not going to be surprised on the day. However, there are things that you can consider when planning your wedding for the colder months. So if you're having any photos outside, you might want something to keep you warm. You might want to provide some blankets for guests and some patio heaters or fire pits for a little chill out area where they can go outside and get a bit of fresh air, but they're not going to freeze. Just think about things that are going to keep guests warm, but the likelihood is you're not going to be hosting much of your day outside because you know it's going to be cold. So I don't think we need to cover the cold weather too much here. Okay, so what about windy weather? So windy weather's a funny one because it can be wet and windy or dry and windy, in which case you can still go outside, but it does come with its own issues. Now, if it's dry and windy, you may decide to carry on, say, with an outside ceremony or an outside drinks reception, which is great. But just bear in mind, if it's really, really windy, you don't want your dress blowing around or your veil blowing around. I mean, I have seen some amazing pictures of that and it is really fun, but that might not be what you want, so do consider that. If your guests have hats and flowy dresses, again, there could be issues, but it's not the end of the world. They're not going to get wet. People will cope. Also consider things that you have, say, on chairs, like your orders of service. Are they going to blow away? You won't really be able to leave them out on the seats. So anything that's not sort of pinned down and held down, you just need to put a little bit of extra thought into where are they going to go, because we don't want them blowing away. Same as marquees. I mean, marquee companies will have looked at the weather, they will make sure everything is okay, but just bear in mind, really, really windy weather, you just need to consider a few extra things and make sure everything is held down nice and strong. If it's wet and windy, you're probably not going to want to go outside. That's not the best combination, and that's when we end up with that horizontal rain. Nobody really wants to be outside for that. You can still get amazing pictures for your couple shots, but just make sure that you have considered the venue options and how the logistics of the day can work so that you can be inside. And if the sun decides to come out, then you can go out as well. So similar to the wet weather. And finally, let's talk about hot weather. Now, I don't think that this is something that brides and grooms really consider over here in the UK. And sometimes the weather can be amazing. It can be a real scorcher. And I don't think couples always think about how that can actually affect their wedding day. So let's just go through a few different options and elements that can be affected and what you can do. So first of all, I think it is key, if you are having a scorcher of a wedding day, you have to make sure that there is water available at all points in the day. So just make sure that your caterers are on it and that they have got water all the way from the beginning of the day, running all the way through, and that it's just easy for guests to go and help themselves, or that people are handing it out to them, that they don't have to go off and find it, because they likely won't. But if it's being handed round to them as well as the other drinks, they are likely to then grab a glass. You do not want dehydrated guests that are drinking alcohol on a really hot day. It is not a good combination. Something else to consider is the fact that guests will get very hot. Are you having an outside ceremony? You might not be getting married in the UK, you may be getting married abroad, and it might be really hot. You don't want your ceremony in an unsheltered location at the middle of the day in the peak heat of the day. That again is not a good combination for guests. They are going to be melting, and having that hot sun on their head in the middle of the day is quite a dangerous combination. So do bear in mind the time of day that you're getting married. Is there shade provided? If it's not the hottest part of the day, you may want to perhaps provide something just to keep your guests cool, like some fans. It's always quite nice, you can personalise them, and it will just help keep your guests a little bit cooler if it really is hot. That's something that you will obviously have to prepare in advance, so you might want to do that if you're getting married abroad, for example. Something else to consider is your wedding cake. Now, over here, obviously we are used to the slightly cooler days. We do get the hot ones, but it's not something that we are dealing with all the time. So if the weather is really, really hot, the regular cakes that we make over here in the UK are not going to fare as well. So make sure, if it's looking like we're having a bit of a heat wave, speak to your cake baker and see if they need to do any extra precautions to help keep your cake chilled, or do they need to tweak the ingredients or tweak anything to make sure that your cake actually survives the day. Because the last thing you want is to be turning up and your cake has just melted. That is not a good look for anybody. The cake maker won't want that, and you certainly won't want that. So do consider that. If you're getting married abroad, it's likely you wouldn't choose the same sort of cake that you would have over here. Buttercream will just melt. So just bear that in mind. Again, if it's hot, does the venue have air conditioning? Things like that just to consider, just to make sure that both yourselves and your guests are nice and comfortable. And finally, your flowers. Again, on a really hot day, the flowers can suffer. They can start to look a little bit sad and they can get a bit wilty. So do you need to put your bouquet in a jug of water throughout the day just to keep it looking perky? Do some of the flowers need spritzing at some point? Can your venue manager help with that? Is there a florist to stay? Can the wedding planner do it? Speak to your florist, get some advice from them. They might tell you how to best manage the flowers. They will no doubt have a contingency plan in place, but if you're worried, speak to them and come up with a plan. There you go, guys. 4 different weather types, contingency plans and tips to help make the days go a little bit smoother. It is so important to have a plan B and even a plan C. And I think if you plan properly, there won't be the stress. I hope you found today's video helpful. Remember, if you haven't already, then make sure you've grabbed my free wedding planning checklist, which is linked in the description box below. I'll see you next week for some more wedding planning goodness. To cover the marquee, no, Lauren. You'll be letting them low last, there's a pigeon on my roof. There's a beeping lorry again. Oh, God, really out of breath. I'll see you next, guys.